We have over. That would be good.
I sent an email that it should include this.
This meeting is being held in compliance with the Brown Act. SCAG offices are open for members of the public to attend and participate in person. Instructions for providing public comment have been provided in advance and are also included in the agenda packet. If a member of this body is attending remotely but is not at a location specified on the agenda, they may observe and comment as a member of the public, but may not participate in any member discussion or voting of this body. For all members participating remotely, please ensure your microphone is muted when not in use. Please state your name during deliberations and whether making a motion or offering a second. Any voting member or member of the public calling into this meeting by telephone can press *6 to mute and unmute. All telephone participants should identify themselves prior to speaking. SCAG encourages all members of the public to participate in its meetings. We are committed to holding meetings accessible to people with disabilities. For members of the public requiring ADA accommodation, please call 213-236-1895. SCAG offers free interpretation services. For members of the public needing information in another language, please call 213-236-1895. The meeting will now begin.
Make sure we have a quorum. So thank you for your patience.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem.
How do y'all plan?
You think it I'm there. Never mind.
Javiera, do you have a good voice? Can you lead us in a song or something as we're waiting? Thank you for everybody's patience. I appreciate it. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to take the moment while we're waiting, and I appreciate your patience. Just to orient folks that may be new to the Joint Policy Committee setup, we typically do a Joint Policy Committee meeting as we kick off our planning process for our Regional Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy. We do this every 4 years. And typically, our joint policy committees meetings are for this kickoff usually is in February. We've delayed till April because there was just a lot of things going on this year. So as you might have noticed in your various committees, you've been seeing some elements of Connect SoCal 2050 come through presentations. This is an opportunity to kind of bring all of it together and have a giant kickoff with all of you together as one committee, as a JPC. So I just want to provide that orientation as we wait and hopefully let folks that are new to the process understand why we have this. We're very judicious in using joint policy committee opportunities like this. So this is it's an exciting day for us, a big party for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Comey.
Who's bringing the wine?
I don't know why.
Red.
Red, I agree. You like all reds?
Yeah. All reds.
Cat.
Cat.
Thank you so much. Maggie, thank you for all your hard work. Appreciate that. So first of all, I just want to say good morning and thanks for your patience. I truly appreciate it. Today is Thursday, April 9th, 2026. The meeting of the Joint Policy Committee is now called to order. If we can please stand and Mr. Mike Goodsell, if you can lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation,
Under God, indivisible.
justice for all. Thank you, Michael. Madam Clerk, can you confirm that we have a quorum?
Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. I will now open up public comments period of this meeting. Staff, do we have any written comments?
We did not receive any written comments, Mr. Vice President.
We have any public comments or anybody here wishing to say something at this time? Okay. So the agenda, do we need to move anything around?
Not at this time.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Okay, our first action is Connect Southern California 2050 Policy Development and Trends. Today, we are gathering all the policy committees together to discuss Connect Southern Cal 2050, which is the next update to our regional transportation plan and sustainable community strategies. Developing this plan every 4 years is one of SCAG's major statutory requirements. Each of the policy committees has received presentations in recent months and updates about goals for this plan and the overall process to prepare for this work ahead of us. This morning, this committee will hear about regional trends, preliminary growth projections to set the stage for the policy discussions that we will be engaging in over the next 2 years. Mr. Philip Law, the Deputy Director of Planning, will begin this presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you and good morning. I'm Philip Law, Deputy Director of Regional Planning, Policy and Analysis here at SCAG. Co-mates took a little bit of my thunder. Today, we have gathered you all collectively together at this key point in our process. We are officially kicking off with you the development of Connect SoCal 2050. This is our Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy, or RTP SES update. So there has been a substantial amount of technical work that's been done to date leading up to today, and we're excited to share some of that with you this morning, and this helps set the stage for our policy development for the plan. Leading up to today, you have received updates at the policy committee meetings, including a review, a refresher of Connect SoCal, all the state and federal requirements that govern what we must include. And also last month, I do want to note the CHD committee took action on our growth vision guiding principles, and those go to the regional council today. And then we'll start our local data exchange process with all 197 of our local jurisdictions. So it's a big day for us in terms of Connect SoCal. The items for today's discussion will provide context on the key issues and highlight opportunities for your engagement in the policy discussions over the next 2 years. So shown here, the bottom 3 bullets are work on the state of the region, the growth projections, and the new Connect SoCal Futures project. These all help us consider where have we been, where are we now, and where are we going. So a little bit of logistics. I'll cover our process, including our draft policy development framework. Then I'll hand it off to my colleagues to discuss the state of the region and the growth projections, and we'll pause for questions and discussion on those items. Then we'll circle back to talk about our futures project and finally seek your approval on the recommended action. So quick summary of what you've discussed at the policy committees recently. As the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, we are required to develop an RTP SES every 4 years using the latest available data and information, and we call our plan Connect SoCal. So this is a long-term vision, right? 20 plus years into the future. It details the investment in our transportation system and the development in our communities to meet the needs of today and tomorrow. So we must meet a host of requirements, including federal transportation conformity and state greenhouse gas reduction targets. So Connect SoCal is one of the most important things that we do as an MPO. In meeting these federal and state requirements, we ensure that our projects are eligible for federal transportation funding and project approvals, as well as state funding programs like the Trade Corridors Enhancement Program. Connect SoCal provides a compass that guides all the planning work that we do, as well as how we distribute funding, such as through our Sustainable Communities Program, and how we do project selection for billions of dollars of federal funding, like the SDBG CMAQ, which is another one of our MPO responsibilities. So Connect SoCal helps set priorities for our state and federal advocacy efforts. So the next federal surface transportation authorization is due later this year with the expiration of IIJA, excuse me, our Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And of course, Connect SoCal informs RENA, our Regional Housing Needs Assessment, and local planning requirements. So I'm sure RENA is on a lot of your minds right now. Connect SoCal and RENA, they are 2 separate processes, but there are statutory linkages and shared objectives between the 2. And through our forecasted regional development pattern, which is a culmination of our local data exchange process that I mentioned earlier, and our plan policies and strategies. So through all this, Connect SoCal provides a strong analytical foundation for the development of the RENA methodology. And RENA methodology is a separate process and must be adopted by the regional council and approved by HCD. And so in June, a couple of months, the CHD committee will receive an informational presentation on the upcoming 7th cycle RENA and next steps, including an overview of the RENA subcommittee and its roles and responsibilities. So our work on updating the key policy elements for Connect SoCal 2050 will start now and go through summer of next year as we prepare a draft plan to be released in the fall of 2027. As you saw at the recent policy committee meetings, we're currently in what we call the data collection and policy development phase, with several key milestones planned for this year. We'll provide timely updates to the policy committees on these items, and for today, I'll focus on the policy development framework. So you'll see in your agenda packet as an attachment to the staff report, the draft policy development framework, and it outlines the process and the leadership roles with the three main sections shown on the slide. So on the left, we're carrying over the same structure from our previous plan. Our focus this cycle will be on revisiting the regional planning policies and implementation strategies to update and prioritize these to focus and reflect emerging issues and challenges that we're expected to face. In the middle, typical in our process, we identify emerging issues that should be areas of focus for policy changes. So one new element this cycle is the Connect SoCal Futures Project, which is a way to account for uncertainty in our policy development process. And you'll hear more about this at the end of the presentation today. And then on the right, leadership speaks to your role. We're recommending as part of the policy development leadership, a special subcommittee this cycle. So previously, we've seen a lot of value in engaging in a subset of policy committee members more deeply in plan development. And so considering that our policy areas are interconnected and integrated, we're proposing one subcommittee as a forum for overarching and cross-cutting policy discussions. So we're recommending today the establishment of the special Connect SoCal 2050 subcommittee with the purpose of providing overarching policymaking guidance related to our plan development. So the way it works is the subcommittee recommendations will flow to the policy committees for their consideration. At the same time, we have subject-specific items that will still route to each policy committee. For example, transit would still go to Transportation Committee, housing to CHD, air quality to EEC. This special subcommittee will consist of at least 2 members from each policy committee with representation across the region. Ex officio members can help provide additional subject matter expertise to the group. The first subcommittee meeting is expected to take place this July, with 7 total meetings anticipated over the course of plan development through early 2028. So in terms of next steps for policy development, we'll do some early engagement to help inform the focus issues for this plan cycle. Pending the action by this body today and approval by the Regional Council next month to establish our subcommittee, the members will be then appointed by the SCAG president at the EAC retreat in June. The subcommittee will begin meeting this summer and will finalize the policy development framework for adoption in the fall. And we'll also start bringing subject-specific items for discussion at the policy committees this fall. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I will pass it over to Sarah Dominguez, Manager of Planning Strategy, and she will discuss the state of the region.
Thank you, Philip. Good morning, everyone. So as Philip mentioned, before we start the policy discussions for Connect SoCal 2050, we wanted to ask ourselves the question of, well, where have we been? How has the region been performing since the start of this century? So to do that, staff have developed the State of the Region report, which uses the 4 pillars of Connect SoCal to organize this information around mobility, communities, the environment, and the economy, to take a snapshot of historic trends and current conditions and help us identify what can be future needs or emergent issues in the SCAG region. So this is available online as of today. Most of the data is looking from 2000 to 2024, around 49 metrics. And it's online in a story maps format so that users can dig in and look at interactive charts, including county by county specific information. So to start and thinking about who we're planning for a changing population. After me, you'll hear more about population and household growth that we're forecasting. But to take a look at the demographics, we are seeing our region become more diverse and multiracial with an increase in the non-white population share. So that as of 2024, about 69% of the region is non-white population. We're also seeing the region become more educated with an increase in those with bachelor's degree or higher. So as of 2024, about 1/3 of the region has either a bachelor's degree or higher. For mobility, we're seeing mobility continue to evolve in the region. So work from home is something that we've been tracking for a lot of years. And from 2000 to 2019, we saw the work from home rate steadily increase to about 6%. And then as a lot of you are aware, in 2020, that spiked a lot with the stay-at-home orders. And that has continued to be high, not as high as 2020, but it's about 16% today. So overall 12.4 percentage point increase over 2000. And then also for transit boardings, although 2020 to 2024 data has seen us returning to pre-pandemic levels, the overall trend since 2000 has been a steady decrease in transit boardings per capita. And then unfortunately, fatalities and serious injuries for people who walk and bike in our region has steadily been increasing. In terms of communities, the State of the Region report is looking both at housing units, so the physical structures, as well as households, the people that live in those houses. So the data for new residential units built, that's just a recent snapshot. That's from the HCD annual progress reports since 2018. It is showing an increase of 25%. However, if you look at longer trends and how we're building housing units compared to households, that growth ratio is going down. So from 2000 to 2010, we were building about 1.7 units for every new household. And then from 2019 to 2024, that went down to 0.7. So not quite enough housing units for the number of households we were seeing. And then this relates then to the housing cost burden that many people are facing. So 2010 was a high mark in the amount of people in the region experiencing the housing cost burden, most likely related to the Great Recession. And for homeowners, we've seen that decline back to pre-Great Recession levels. However, for renters, they have continued to face housing cost burden. I believe it's over 50% for renters in the region today. So for environment, we're looking both at how our activities are impacting the environment, as well as how the environment can impact us. So using vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, as a rough proxy for greenhouse gas emissions, we've seen overall an almost 9% decrease since 2000 in VMT per capita in the region. For water consumption, data from the State Water Resources Control Board has seen in the 10-year period from 2014 to 2024, about a 27% decrease. So this shows that conservation efforts are working. And then lastly, for, when we're thinking about the future and thinking about climate change, it's not just in the future. We are experiencing impacts of a changing climate today. So extreme heat is defined as the 98th percentile of maximum daily temperatures for a location. That means this differs depending on where you are in the region. For Ventura County, it's 88.8 degrees. And then in Imperial, it's 111 degrees. So in 2000, we averaged in the region about one of these days per year. In 2020, we had 9. And for Imperial, like I mentioned, was 111 degrees. They experienced 16 days of extreme heat in 2020. So as we're looking at this trend over time, we're seeing more and more extreme heat days. So before I move on, I do want to plug our SCAG's recently released Regional Resilience Toolkit. Does include mitigation strategies for extreme heat. So the last pillar that I'll touch on this morning is the economy. And so I've mentioned a couple of things that have shown up in all of the data sets, which is 2 major events, the Great Recession and the COVID-19 pandemic, that's showing up across all these data sets. And what we've seen over time is in the economic indicators is that we're continuing to see economic recovery, and that makes us think that our economy is overall resilient. What we've seen, a couple of the indicators, is a 52% increase in the median household income, and that's inflation adjusted. For unemployment, we did hit kind of a high mark in 2010, again, related to the Great Recession of 12.5%, which is now down to 5.4% today. And then overall, looking at poverty rate, it also peaked in 2010 at 16% and has declined to just under 12% by 2024. So hopefully that was a lot of information, just a few of the indicators that are available today in the State of the Region report that's online. You can access it by using that QR code. And I just want to, quickly thank Anita Au and her team for not only doing the analysis and the data preparation, but also making it so interactive. And so you can each dig into your specific county as well to see how these trends are affecting your community. So I am now going to pass it to Kevin Kane for the preliminary regional growth projections.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Philip. Thank you, Mr. Chair, everybody, for being here today. Yesterday, I was poking around the office and I found a copy of SCAG's 1973 Growth Management Plan. It was called. That was the chapter of the RTP back then that covered growth forecasting. And it really just kind of illustrated how longstanding this is for our agency, for our region, and how this starting point really flows from both federal and state requirements. This is really kind of where we start our planning effort, and this becomes the technical underpinning for a lot of the policy work that you and this policy committee are going to do. So, unlike a purely demographic forecast, which the State Department of Finance does, they're concerned really just with projecting population straight up. SCAG's mandate requires us to develop a more balanced outlook that also includes households and employment. Put simply, you have to have a plausible number of people for the jobs, and you got to have sufficient housing for the people. That's what this diagram up here really indicates nicely. Most economists and economist types will give you a forecast for like 18 months, maybe 2, maybe even 3 years sometimes. But we have to go 20 or sometimes even 30 years out. So we use really a different set of main forecast assumptions that you see here. Some really molasses slow, kinds of things. And rather than a black box kind of a model, which you see some of the regional agencies do, we really prefer and pride ourselves on using expert opinion to fine tune these assumptions and these components that you see here. And the thinking is that really helps you as policymakers connect what's going on in the data and the modeling to the policy decisions that you make here. So to that end, we had a demographic panel of experts meeting back in September to consider plausible and likely levels, all these components here. And that's really how we started our forecast process for this plan. So let me talk about the crystal ball that we don't actually have in terms of projecting out to 2050. We make a lot of assumptions based on what we have at the time. And over the last 3 plan cycles, which means over the last 12 years, we've gotten a lot more information about what's happening in the world. And the outlook for the region's population has really changed dramatically. You can read more about it in the LA Times this morning. Just a shameless plug. But our population stands at roughly about 18.5 million right now. And 12 years ago, we thought we'd be heading toward about a 23 million person region here in Southern California. Well, the fertility rate did not rebound. We had Census 2020, which showed us we were a lot lower than we were. And 4 years ago in this room, well, the Zoom room equivalent, we were looking at about 20.1 million. Then we had a bit of a temporary spike in out-migration during COVID. Realized that was temporary, so it bounced back a little bit. And the biggest, most recent change is federal immigration policy, a massive change that's really changed the inflow of population to Southern California in particular here. So the best available information has changed, the components have changed, and this is how we have an outlook of virtually no population growth anticipated over the next 3 or so decades. I mean, for one, there's no evidence that we'll have more kids. Fertility rate is about 1.43 right now. That's expected to go down to about 1.27. I know there's been a lot of focus on kind of this Cal exit notion, a lot of folks leaving. We know people who have left, I'm sure. But this has kind of been the dynamic for the last 30 or 35 years. And this level does vary year to year. It's a big factor, but it doesn't explain the magnitude of this jump from last plan to this plan. Like I said, that's federal immigration policy. Immigrants replenishing our population has been, really the bread and butter for the people, for the economy here. Given what 2025 data show so far, the panel suggested that we drastically reduce the 2025 to 2029 immigration assumption. And because this is going to have lingering effects, and because global fertility rates, global population growth is down, we reduced the immigration projection even further, past 2030 all the way to 2050. And that's pretty consistent with what the state is doing in their projections right now. So that's kind of the story behind our new low growth outlook. If we look to households, though, which is kind of the second piece here, it really kind of tells a different story. The last couple of plan cycles, we've chugged along pretty consistently in housing production, certainly far from some targets, but at a fairly good clip between 40 and 55,000 units per year region-wide. A little bit of a change in shape here in the 2024 plan, but what we're looking at now for the 2050 plan, it's a lot lower. It's about 13% over the plan horizon instead of about 19%. This is in a context where there's virtually no population growth. And I'd say there's three reasons why this isn't flat, why we do expect housing growth to continue at a relatively consistent clip and then taper off in like the 2030s or so. First, there's latent demand. We're still underhoused. There aren't swaths of kind of vacant areas. They're being filled. Houses are still being sold. The second is aging. We'll be older, and older folks consume more housing per capita. Think empty nesters, for example, with two or even one individual in a housing unit instead of a larger family. And third, we're comfortable projecting this amount of household growth, which is about 850,000, despite no population growth, because housing production in the last decade has been quite strong and quite consistent, in fact. And a portion of that strength, I'd say, is clearly due to supportive policy. And also the fact that we've been building more than single-family homes as well. There's been a lot more multifamily and ADUs kind of in that plan. So that really allows the forecast to kind of stay high, even though population growth is low. But let's take a look at that balance a little bit more. This committee's certainly heard about the historic backlog of housing from Sarah and others earlier, a lot of it before 1991. But this is how population growth has looked like in Southern California in the last 35 years or so. Pretty high in the mid-1990s, tapering off, and then actually went negative for a few years recently here. The dark green line here that's popping up is new housing units. And I made a couple of little technical adjustments so this can show nicely. But that, we have a lot that's been happening here. We stopped building apartments in the 90s. We had a big boom in greenfield construction in the early 2000s, a great recession. Then, as I mentioned, we kind of figured out how to more stably build a kind of a wider range of housing products. So that line since 2014 has been remarkably stable, even though population growth has been really low. You see a lot of blue here, a lot of times where housing unit growth exceeds population growth lately. Some of these new units are certainly housing people. Some of them may remain vacant, become short-term rentals, second homes, ADUs that don't get occupied. But we've actually seen some evidence too, that household overcrowding rates have ticked down a couple of notches. Also, the rate of household formation. Actually, this is our biggest forecast input. This had been going down consistently since 1980. But around 2019, 2020, it flattened. Actually, we're seeing more folks be heads of household than before. So it does appear that more production and lower population growth are at least allowing some more people to kind of access the housing stock of the region. And our expert panel anticipates that to continue for the next decade or so. So again, to recap, we've had about a little more than 500,000 new housing units since 2016 against a really small population gain. So that's the open question, ensuring that this goes to those who need it the most. So the third piece here of the puzzle is the employment projection. And job growth is a lot more up and down. You can see here in the 2020 plan, we didn't predict COVID happening. That was unfortunate, but that line goes right through that dip there. We did a little bit better in the 2024 plan. But goodness, we're looking at a really different future here now in terms of employment, of really just about 1% growth and pretty much all of that prior to 2035. This is just because of two main reasons, really. The first is the population growth, the low population growth that I mentioned. And the second is because artificial intelligence and automation are really expected to impact more industries than just the software development and professional services industries that they've been really hitting hard lately. There are a couple of schools of thought on the overall job impact of that. They're certainly thinking that this will, create more jobs in software development and tech. However, as it goes to other industries such as, construction, to a degree, healthcare, retail, et cetera, there are a lot of opportunities for kind of reduction. But, the other factor here to remember is the low population growth. So these things kind of work in tandem here to yield this really low employment forecast, which is going to look a lot different in future maps of local jurisdictions that we'll be sharing pretty soon. If you look at the sectors where we expect growth, there's really just one, healthcare and social assistance, where that's a little bit less automatable. Some of the back office functions of hospitals certainly can use AI, but that's a little bit of a tougher lift for doctors, nurses, and home health aides. If you take away healthcare and social assistance, job growth is actually negative by 2050 in Southern California. So just a few implications here to kind of wrap this up. What does this all mean when you put these three factors together instead of just looking at, say, population on its own? Well, we always knew we were going to get older, but as a direct implication of those recent changes that I mentioned, fertility, immigration policy, aging's really accelerated. Our median age in Southern California right now, if it pops up, is Edward, help me out here. All right. It's about 38.8 right now. We anticipated it going up to 40. In the next line, this is a 2024 plan. We thought we would be at a median age of about 43.8 by the end of the plan horizon. Now we're looking at 46.4. So quite a bit older than we thought even 8 years ago, sitting in this room being prepared for the 2020 plan. Another implication is the region's average household size. We usually have on average about 3 people per household. Now this is an average, so there are, big households and one-person households as well. And we always knew this was going to go down a little bit, but this started to go down a lot more steeply in the last plan and even further now. We're currently sitting at about an average household size of 2.84. We're anticipating this to go down to 2.49. And again, as I kind of alluded to, there could be a silver lining here, certainly, with all this latent housing demand, we have a good opportunity to kind of plan better for the residents of the region. But don't forget that this is an average here. So you have some smaller households made up of older folks, but the SCAG region also is one of the highest in the nation for multi-generational living. So that means households with 3 or more workers. So adult children living with their parents for longer, not starting, their own household, or instances of families, cousins, what have you, doubling up into the same household. Surveys tend to tell us that there are some benefits to this, but largely a response to economic pressures. So it's not just about the volume, it's about the distribution and the degree to which some of these things are kind of centered around people, families, communities in terms of both the housing and the jobs projections here. Again, we've done kind of a balanced forecast for compliance and modeling purposes for several decades here. And there's really huge uncertainty with what's going to happen by 2050. What we've got here as a starting point for your policy work is a technically credible forecast, but it's also one that sets Connect SoCal up for success. So we know the population is going to be stable or a slight decline. We're going to age. Housing growth is going to be slower, but it's still going to be faster than population growth. And this forecast also does assume that new units and supportive policy will help to alleviate this underhousing. Without that, we probably would have some changed forecast outlook. So we already kind of assume some successes within here. The job outlook's really flat. It follows population growth in AI. It's going to be really concentrated in healthcare. But we're also assuming that workers will be supported, that housing is distributed well. So that's kind of part of the regional plan. And that's part of how we kind of link this crystal ball that we don't have with the policy and plan development cycles. I don't have time to go into county level numbers today. You'll find those in your packet. And as Philip alluded to earlier, we're actually launching our local data exchange process. We have a regional council item on that. That'll actually start getting into the city level and even the neighborhood level for projections. But I will leave it there. And I think it's time for a brief question, if you've got questions on kind of the technical materials that Sarah and I have shared.
What a great presentation. Thank you so much. Let me open it up to the Joint Policy Committee members for questions.
Hand up, or raise hand.
Give me a name.
So I see first here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. My question to you and your team would be, is this research and data comparative to other regions or maybe even states?
A lot of these trends are global and national in nature. Housing pressures do tend to be creeping up, nationwide. That supply issue is kind of spilling over to other places. I will say in terms of the magnitude of the federal immigration policy change, that affects us a little bit more. We have disproportionately a higher immigrant share of the population that makes up a lot more of our inflow than even the rest of the state as a whole. So you might see in like state projections of the Bay Area, for example, you'll see the same shape, but you won't see the same magnitude exactly as we have in the 6-county area here.
And what about farming regions? Like, for example, when we talk about economic growth or sustainability, is there a difference between us as a more commerce-centric region versus, let's say, a farming or any other economic drive?
Yeah, and you know, Imperial County in particular is always our great little gut check for kind of a more agricultural economy. That's especially difficult to project. Man, it goes up and down in cycles a heck of a lot more. You know, Central Valley may have some more stability because that's also an area that is farming, but it's also kind of becoming more housing for the bigger urban areas. So there are a few different dynamics in terms of the actual growth in farming communities that we don't get into quite in as much detail, a little bit in Imperial County, I'd say.
Got it. Thank you.
And then I'll just share for the State of the Region report online. There's narratives and discussion for all the data indicators, including the ones that I mentioned today. And many of them do have kind of the comparison to where we stand to the state, but then also nationally, kind of where we fit in with the trends.
Okay.
Thank you. Let me go to Mrs. Wallace.
No, she said one question I was gonna ask.
How about Mrs. Finley?
Thank you. Honestly, Kevin, I've been doing this a lot of years, and this is probably the best presentation. I love hearing all about projections and demographics. And so thank you for, once again, making my day. COVID, nobody expected that. What has that impacted the most with your projections? I mean, clearly people, you know, they can work from home now, but as far as housing, did that impact housing growth at all? Transportation? What did COVID do to all this?
I think in the State of the Region report alluded to this a certain degree as well. You know, work from home shares have gone up tremendously. You know, if you even split this down to the newer modality of hybrid work, we're sitting at about 33% of work days are worked at home now. At the peak of COVID, that was about 40%, and pre-COVID, that was under 10% of work days actually worked at home. So taking into account how often you hybridly work. You know, so that's definitely had impacts, you know, on transportation and total, you know, VMT. The thinking is that there has been somewhat of, you know, a rebound effect. You get to do a little bit more discretionary travel. You know, you've got a certain amount of a travel budget that you're using a little bit less overall on commuting. You might be able to take more trips on the weekends or do other stuff as a result. So, you know, Sarah had some of the overall vehicle miles traveled numbers, and those ticked down a little bit, but not as much as you'd expect based on the amount that we're telecommuting now. As far as overall growth is concerned, I don't know that it was like a total sea change in terms of the population components. You know, fertility trends and family formation trends were already kind of slowing down quite a bit. That certainly did accelerate them. We did have a couple of years of increased mortality. You know, actually, we lost a lot of people during COVID. So that impacts, you know, not only the numbers, but, you know, kind of going forward as well. And while we did see in 21 and 22 a lot of people leaving the region on net, more so than usual, 2024, that kind of swung back a little bit. And then 2025, it swung back again. So, you know, that's really kind of an equilibrium thing between Southern California and the rest of the country. Is life better here with the great climate, the jobs, the culture, the people, and a small home? Or do you really have a strong preference for elsewhere? So I think a lot of those marginal movers left during that COVID period. But that's something that goes back and forth. Hope that characterizes it for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Let me go to Mr. Mirish.
Thank you so much. So if I understand correctly, household size reduction is not just the result of empty nesters. It is the result of declining fertility, people staying single, having fewer kids, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you would think then that since there are fewer people per household, the kind of housing that's built would be adjusted for that. Maybe people don't need as big sizes and that sort of thing. Would that be a reasonable assumption?
It's reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then the other thing is you mentioned AI and the impact that that's going to have on jobs and job growth. Do you foresee the need or the institution of a universal basic income, something along those lines? And if that is the case, how will that impact all of these other stats that we're looking at? If we're thinking ahead, and I've spoken with people who are in the AI realm, and some of them do feel that this is going to be necessary. How can we incorporate that potential into our planning?
Well, I'm going to get the shepherd's crook here if I go too into detail on this, Councilmember Mirisch. But actually, our 2017 demographic workshop, if you can recall that far back, was actually featured on universal basic income. That was the theme. We had some speakers on that, so that actually has been around for quite a while. I will say though that based on this latest round of projections going into Connect SoCal, the number of jobs is probably less related to overall economic growth than it has been in past plan cycles. We see lots of evidence of that, but clearly a really low job projection does not mean the economy tanks necessarily. It's just that jobs and economic output are a little bit more delinked. So I think that's what I can say from the perspective of a forecast. And you may be able to take that to the next level with regards to policy solutions such as maybe a universal basic income or what have you.
Well, does that, sorry, just one final question. Does that indicate that because of that, there's going to be increasing income inequality, which obviously has a huge impact on housing? And if that's the case, then we should get all those statistics because that will be important to be able to inform policy decisions.
I would say that historical trends would support that.
Thank you, sir. Let me go to Mrs. Doby.
Thank you. And I echo, I do really enjoy your presentations when you come in. They're so easy to follow. I don't feel like I have to be a genius. So thank you for speaking to the simple. I actually have two questions. The first is when considering housing projection, how does the pricing affect those projections? Because, I'm Orange County. So where I come from, you can't move because the rent is like $4,500 for a 2-bedroom, half a bath. So is that considered? And then I have another question.
It is to a degree. Again, you can do forecasts for tons of different purposes. This is a Connect SoCal specific forecast. We really use this to model the necessary compliance components and travel demand in 2050. So we don't get into extremely high levels of detail on kind of the price equilibrium and some of that detailed economic modeling that you can do. What we look at is past production trends and latent demand or kind of previously unmet demand, and kind of project that forward. The other side is how that affects, like, say, a fertility rate or whether people stay in the region or leave. So like I mentioned kind of in that last slide, we do assume some successes already in our forecast approach here, and that's to set us up for an outlook and for a policy vision, not just a forecast, for Connect SoCal. So we are kind of assuming, within that housing production, continues relatively strongly, that the pressure toward out-migration starts to wane, a little bit, and that we do still have, robust economic growth here and a lot of little and local policies to support that. So, while we don't have an economic model for rent, and I think most economists, kind of in this, UCLA Anderson forecast, I know talks about this issue a lot. Supply is one piece toward cost reduction, but it's one of many, many pieces. So I hope that kind of sheds a little light.
I'll take it. And then my second question is regarding job growth. I see a lot of people that say healthcare is going to be the major, I guess, grouping that will continue to thrive. And I shouldn't have to consider this at the local level, but the more it gets conflated at the state level, I find that we have to consider it. Are we looking at the trades? I've been talking to some of my colleagues, and we are kind of thinking that maybe the trades will also get a boom because there are certain things that you can't farm out to AI if you are in the trades. So are we considering that? Are we looking at that? Is that...
Yeah, what we have an economic roundtable, and we have, some kind of economists who help us out with some insights on that. And the I think the overall thrust is that you've got to kind of decompose jobs and sectors into like specific tasks that can be automated or can't. And within the trades, there are certain ones that that can be automated. There's a lot more, factory built, housing components. So, on site needs to be just a little bit more assembly. You may not need, masons and carpenters and plumbers to the same degree if that can be done in a factory. So there are some components of trades that works in the opposite direction, but there are others that probably are really tough to AI or automate away. And I think this healthcare and social assistance has been one of those categories that probably does have a lot more trades. That's a really broad category of personal services and things as well. Yes and no. Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much. My next person actually is going to be Mrs. Rossi.
Thank you. I know I've been harping on this a little bit, but one of the questions I have on technical is when we're looking at the population projections and even healthcare is the role of the mortality rates and how that's being integrated in. So in healthcare, one of the reasons that I see as the reason you're seeing this increased job growth is that you have an aging population that will be requiring much higher levels of care, but there's also a mortality rate connected to that. So, and I've said this before, but just as we had the great retirement, we're going to have another great event coming, and I'm not seeing that reflected in the numbers. And I think it's something that people need to be thinking about long-term, because it's that boom up, but then it will follow with a drop.
And that's one of the reasons you see the tapering off of the total population kind of in the late 2030s and 2040s. This is really kind of summary high level. So it's probably not going to be able to see that level of detail. Summarized everything with just like one median age line there. But that's a great point. The oldest baby boomers are turning 80 this year, and that's a large generation that in the next 20 years or so is going to move into those age brackets that have high mortality rates. So, there are going to be the number of aggregate deaths is going to go up. What our expert panel, ultimately just kind of settled on for a forecast assumption is that mortality rates are not really going to change all that much. So your survival rate at a particular age is probably going to stay about the same. There are countervailing factors here. A little bit less federal healthcare investment, that would mean more mortality. But then again, better technologies, even healthcare technologies, that would mean less mortality. So the net effect, we thought would probably be around zero for the rate.
I guess I'm trying to understand how that works, like how the mortality rate wouldn't increase if you have a blip going with the population reaching that piece. But the other piece of it, though, it goes to the housing component, which is, I believe California has the highest rate of seniors who have multiple properties, and how that is also going to be an impact. Because one of my concerns that I have is, especially when you have having multiple properties, including multi-units as well, but there's this possibility of a great eviction crisis, right? Because as they start selling off the properties, or their children start selling off the properties, that we're going to be looking at a serious situation where new owners, under like the laws that we have, can't have the rents the same prices, and we'll be looking at a situation where we have massive evictions coming on. It's something that is like kind of keeps me up a little bit at night. And then I think sorry, I have a couple pieces on this. The other piece is, as we look through planning, what I have struggled with is I keep seeing, it's transportation, employment, housing, but it's the healthy communities. And the state has had such a focus on housing production only, without looking at, as we're producing a lot of housing, are we making sure that the communities have enough park space and open spaces? Do they have enough community service spaces? Do they have, the library sizes and whatnot to be able to accommodate it? Now you layer into this other piece where you have AI coming in, and so many of the assumptions around the increased housing around transit, public transit, was around a workforce that was working on their laptops and computers. So then if you're looking at situations where trades and other things are the need, go back to the transit piece of it. So just thoughts is that the holistic view.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I'll also defer to Philip for the sign up sheet for the Connect SoCal subcommittee
Yeah.
that will presumably be formed as well.
Yeah.
So these are great topics to get into there. I will say a couple of quick points on that. That's one of the reasons why we have to look at this in a balanced, holistic way. That's one of the reasons the expert panel and the staff on this wanted to make the point that new housing units aren't necessarily inherently for people and for the people who need them. That is kind of a policy solution that we're assuming here, that we're going to assume some level of success that state and local and regional policies will help to flesh out. You mentioned housing insecurity. That's much higher on the renter side for sure. So that's a great point to kind of make in terms of the seniors who are renters specifically. But then I'll add, and perhaps Elizabeth Carvajal, Sarah Jepson, whomever, we have a lot of kind of policy solutions in the housing space and housing programs to work on as well. So,
and I can also add our next presentation section on the future study. I think it gets at a lot of the questions that you're asking. So if we can move to that perhaps, and then we have a recommended action that we would like to get to before the meeting's over.
I just want to say something real fast. First of all, these are great questions, so thank you so much. We set aside about 35 minutes for discussion. So right now I've only had 5 people speak. I still have 7 more to go. So if we can just sort of just wind it up just a little bit, I'd really appreciate it. So Mr. Rhodes, you're up next, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I was watching the presentation, and I was focusing in on housing growth outpacing population growth. And as the incoming chair of CEHD and RENA being right around the corner, this is a huge topic of what will be the projected number of housing units. When in that model, should that trend remain, do we get to this parity where we have a comfortable amount of housing supply to match the population? And I understand that the mix has to be right as well, but if we're on this trend, how long before we're in this comfortable zone? And now specifically, I'm going to, it would be a RENA question, but yeah.
I mean, it's tough to say. It depends on so many factors. To be honest, if you look at 2 plan cycles ago, we were projecting a really different outlook overall. So there's the crystal ball that we kind of have a little bit of insight to, and then the one that we don't. I'd certainly anticipate that, the foundation that we've set here and some of the data points and some of the strategic points from that, will hopefully set up some of those discussions really nicely at CEHD and RENA subcommittee.
And maybe more importantly, if this data is available to HCD, who will come up with some random number that we don't understand.
Very much so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Mrs. Crosswhite, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Mrs. Buckman?
Thank you. I appreciate you tying and going through how this is going to all tie into RENA, and so I won't expand on that. And Rocky actually hit on something that I was going to ask, and that has to do with HCD and how are they determining the housing needs that will be done, and are they taking input from some of this very good information? So thank you, Kevin and team, for what you put together. I would be interested in that. And then my second question is there any component of the job growth that can be tied back to California policies, which I think can also be tied back to the diminishment of construction jobs as well?
In the interest of time, maybe I can defer the RENA-related questions to the June CHD committee.
Okay.
But the answer is statutorily October 2026 is when the regional number would come out. And in advance of that is the time when any and all information would be considered by HCD.
So what's our process for getting that info?
About employment policy. I can't recall a specific on that from our expert panel. Apologies.
Okay, it's all right. It's just something to consider as we continue to discuss it. I'll leave it at that and continue the conversation in CEHD. Thank you so much.
Get that. Mrs. Parada?
Hi, so on page 22 of the agenda, it talks to population increases and total households. And for San Bernardino County, it's saying that we're going to have a decrease in population of 25,000, but yet we're gonna have an increase in households in 115,000. I don't, so you would think that if we had an increase in households that we would have a increase in population, so I don't quite, help me with that.
Well, yeah, that's again a little bit of the conundrum of the outlook that we have right now, and that mirrors the regional trend, as well, of relatively slow population growth and high household growth. Some of this is based on past trends, available sites, pro-housing policies, things like that, and a lot of the unbundling that hopefully we can see happening over the longer term time horizon. I think we can get into more detail on specific counties or even specific jurisdictions following the launch of the local data exchange process, hopefully this afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prada. Let me go to Huff.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for a great presentation. My question is to Dr. Dominguez regarding her historical overview and trends. It was discouraging to see the minus 52% for public transportation use and 22% increase in injuries on bikes and walking. Realistically, can we continue to focus on our major emphasis on getting people onto transportation and out of automobiles? Having lived in Washington, D.C. and Boston that have excellent public transportation where you can walk to a station and expect to get on a train to your destination in 5 to 7 minutes and not get mugged on the train, can we realistically continue to keep that focus, or should we be also thinking more about how to deal with our traffic problems on freeways?
I think, continuing to invest in transit is important for the accessibility in the region. To speak to housing trends, we are seeing a lot of housing being developed near current transportation investments. And so I think for, what we saw in the last Connect SoCal and what we're likely to see going forward is really a lot of the investments that we're making are in the operations of our current system. So this includes operations and maintenance for transit, operations and maintenance for streets and roads, including investments in safety. And so I think we're continuing with an all and above approach to the whole network and to serve all users in the region.
Thank you.
Let me go to Reyes, please, next. Oh, Gabriel Reyes. Let me go to Moore. Carol Moore.
Yeah, I did lower my hand, but my question is, quick statement. We talk about increasing healthcare workers and the aging population, but I don't see, and I hope that's in the thought is given to using the Japanese model. They have a good history here of encouraging people to age in place. Thank you.
Ms. Reyes, please. Gabriel Reyes. Gabriel? Okay, no problem. I'm going to go back to Mrs. Crosswhite. I do have a couple minutes. Thank you, ma'am.
So this was something that I don't think I've heard a question on. If you could say just a teeny bit more about, or like as we go through this process, about some of it, whether or not there's connections between sort of the immigration trend changes, growth projections, right? And like, are we assuming that like the automation would happen anyway, or is the automation accelerating because of some of the changes in immigration? And then does that then keep the need for immigration lower going forward? Or like, so what are our assumptions in that area?
That's a very pithy question, because it's about causality. I think a lot of this is certainly interrelated. If you have a slow growing population and less ability to have workers come in from elsewhere, you're going to engender more technological change and faster adoption of that technological change, and that can certainly snowball and become a bit more of a self-fulfilling prophecy down the road. Over the very, very long term, which is kind of our outlook here, certainly we consider both of those trends in the especially slow growth outlook. Again, this is the purpose of this is to set up a Connect SoCal forecast. It doesn't answer necessarily every specific question, in that level of detail. But I think you've hit upon, a couple of really key interrelated trends that yield the outlook that you see here.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Let me go to my counsel here.
Pardon me for interrupting, Mr. Vice President. I understand that there's a lot of interest in all of these very important topics. We do have folks who are using the comment section in the webinar on the virtual platform. We're going to ask that you please refrain from doing that. Remember, this is an open and public meeting, and there are people who maybe just listening and can't read, and certainly the members who are here in the room cannot read your comments and statements. So please do refrain from doing that. We're having technology check to see whether we can disable that function, but in the meantime, we'll just focus on verbal input, please. Thank you.
Okay. So the presentation, can we continue the presentation, please?
So I think I'm already hearing a really robust discussion on future. So I wanted to talk for a couple moments about this new initiative that we're undertaking in parallel with this development of Connect SoCal. But I want to differentiate the two. So for the purposes of developing Connect SoCal 2050, we must, to meet our federal and Clean Air Act requirements, the plan and observe trends and establish trends in data. But one thing I think we can all agree on is that the future in 2050 is going to look different from what we can imagine today. So how can we ask the question of what could happen and help us inform policies that we make for Connect SoCal to ensure that they're robust across a number of plausible futures? So moving quickly here, when we're thinking about what could happen in Southern California, we're thinking about drivers of change, big things like aging population, climate change that can impact and reshape systems in our region. We're also looking at trends. Those are things that are observable and measurable. I mentioned earlier about work from home. That was a trend we've been tracking for a number of years, but we had not anticipated the spike after the COVID-19 pandemic. And then signals are earlier things like technology or social or political developments that maybe we don't have clarity or data to support where it's going to go or what's going to happen, but things that we can be looking out for. And so when we're thinking about the future in 2050 from where we stand today, that's about 24 years in the future. And what I've learned from talking to foresight specialists, scenario planners, is it's really hard for us to think broadly and imaginatively about the future. So kind of as an exercise to get us primed for a couple minutes of discussion, let's look back to 2002. That's 24 years in the past. So thinking about kind of in relation to where we are to 2050. So in 2002, we were about 2 years away from Facebook and all the changes that social media has made to how we get information today. We were about 5 years out from the iPhone, and think about today, we can pay for our coffee, get on the train with using a smartphone. And the Toyota Prius was on the road, but we're years away from seeing a full electric vehicle. And we did not at all anticipate the Great Recession or COVID-19. So as we are thinking about the futures and preparing those over the next year, we wanted to hear from you about things that you're noticing, concerns. I'm actually already hearing a lot this morning, so thank you for that. We want to learn more from you and hear about that so that we can help inform the futures that we're preparing, along with the inputs that we're getting from our technical advisory group. And we'll be coming forward to the Connect SoCal subcommittee with some more information and sharing out as we're developing that. So as just kind of some questions to get you thinking, I know that we will need to move to the action in a few moments. But if there's anybody who wants to share a little bit about what are you seeing, more uncertainty or unpredictability in your worker community. I'm already hearing about universal basic income, the impact of an aging population on renters in the region. But if anybody wants to share about where you see momentum building or how any drivers or trends are gonna challenge our current practices. So willing to hear anything, but we appreciate any insights that you want to share with us this morning so we can work it into our futures work.
Mr. McKellen?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a comment, because of policy decisions made at the federal government level, it's going to be extremely difficult this time to show conformity and may not show it. And that's going to really impact our transportation system. So that's a comment. Conformity is going to be a real issue this time.
Hey, Mr. Grabbard?
Thank you, Chair. The two most troubling trends that I saw on the presentation were the declining occupancy rate in homes. And I'm worried about social isolation going forward as the population ages. And then secondly, the lower fertility rate, excuse me. And what can we do? How do we fix it? I'll just make it that blunt. How do we fix both of those? Because both are going to create a huge problem, not just regionally, but nationally. And if you guys, you're the smart folks, so what are some policy things that we can do to help promote both?
Here, please.
Thank you, Chair. You picked on me? Yes. Okay, great. I think my concern or my suggestion would be, do we associate ourselves as as an organization with our educators, like our colleges, knowing that California has a gold standard and it attracts the best educators and students, not only regionally, statewide, but internationally, right? So can we propose a remapping of the kind of education we provide? Like if we're heavy on the EEC, the Energy Environmental Committee requirements, then can we educate those students and maybe even cap it if we don't need too many workers in our region from those educational facilities? Like I just want us, and this goes back to Councilmember Rossi's comment, right? We're not prepared for that dip, but can we then, really give a starting point for our youth that is spending time and energy in our education systems here in Southern California or wherever, to kind of, think about those avenues and then, spend time in that direction, given this forecast, given this prediction that we have. So yeah, that's my suggestion. I think if we kind of, because I know in free market society, you can't really tell people what to do. And colleges really make their living off of, whatever the students want. So they accept a number of students based off of the monetary compensation that they get in return. But if we can just kind of facilitate that, okay, can we just rezone some of these departments and then tell them that these are the jobs that we predict that we might need and also benefit from? Perhaps we're looking at a solution here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Dutray. John Dutray.
You hear me? This is not going to work. Sorry, this is not going to work.
Sorry, John. Mrs. Harnick.
Thank you. I really appreciate about education. Given what we've just looked at, an emphasis on relevant education to our needs is really needed. But the one thing I wanted to say when we're talking about uncertainty and unpredictability, we showed that the health industry will continue to grow, the medical. But what I'm seeing, actually looking at and seeing in our communities, we don't have enough medical care. We don't have enough health services. And as we are putting housing in, we don't have the emphasis on putting medical care near them. And they don't, these community members, our new community members, don't have access to health care because it's not near them. We've emphasized the houses, we haven't necessarily emphasized medical care. How is that going to impact our health outcomes when we have so many thousands and millions of people who may not have access to quality health care? So I think it's something we need to look at. Thank you.
Takahashi?
Yes, thank you. Great presentation, great discussion. Thank you so much for these questions. One thing that I think that I noticed that doesn't get discussed in these kind of conversations fairly often is kind of like the experience and the what we can expect from our young adults and emerging professionals and how they make choices. My kids are in their 20s. I have a 27-year-old, a 25-year-old, and a 22-year-old. And the way that they are approaching their professionalism is, and the peers are too, is different than those of us. I'm Gen X and those of us older. And I think it's important to look at how they choose to get around, how they choose to live their lives. We're seeing them choosing later to have children, later to get their careers and professions going, later that they become independent adults out in the world and living with their family more. I have one of our children is living with us, and their values are shifting too. What's important to them. None of my children have cars. Only one of them has a driver's license, and they all live in LA. And most of their peers don't either because they can't afford it. And also for them, if they have to make a choice, that is for them, the value is not as high for buying a car than say for those of us who grew up in the 80s and 70s and 80s. And so I think that that there's a value in really understanding the emerging demographic of young folks, in addition to what we've been talking to, which is the emerging demographic of the larger number of people who are no longer going to be working or who are going to need more healthcare as they age, as we all age. And so I think that it's important to, if maybe you have already, it just wasn't in the presentation, but important to recognize these emerging adults and how their difference in how they approach their professional lives and their personal lives might have an impact on how they, our systems and how they use them. Thank you.
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm good.
She's good.
Yeah.
Member Munoz Guevara.
Sure. I think the thing that I in looking at these questions, that really comes to mind is how it impacts future economic development opportunities, right? I mean, my community is very, very immigrant, right? And very recent immigration, right? We've become, we've gone from majority white to majority Black to majority Latino in one generation, basically. And so obviously, like, one of our major employer is our hospital, right? And it contributes directly to 2,000 jobs. It's just interesting to see how the declining immigration will continue to impact those jobs. So I think that's just one thing I really want to understand is, and I know a couple of people mentioned it, like how it's going to impact future opportunities for economic development.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I have time for 3 more questions. I'm going to go to Mrs. Margaret Clark next.
Yes, I have a huge concern about what was said. I mean, the trends that are always out there about AI taking over so many jobs and us having maybe to have a basic living payment for people that have been put out of work. And one of my frustrations is, and I say it whenever I get on the, with someone that's on the phone that's AI, and then I have to get somebody that's human. I say, I wish you would get a raise and get rid of the robots because they don't know what they're doing really often. But it's not that I don't like AI. In the medical profession, for example, I had one knee replaced right before COVID. I wasn't going near a hospital during COVID. Afterwards, I had the other one done just last year, late last year, and it was such a difference because the automated did it precisely, and it doesn't damage as many tendons, tissues or muscles. So I was out of there really good. And when I went for the follow-up, he said, well, most people are at 90 degrees, you're at 127, so come back in 5 years. So there is a place for AI, but just taking a job of a person that's on the phone with a bank or something like that and things like that. I know we can't mandate not to allow certain jobs being taken over, but it's very disturbing to me because I get so frustrated. I'm yelling at the phone. Why don't you understand what I'm saying? So anyway, I'll shut up.
Margaret, thank you. Let me go to Mrs. Rossi.
Thank you. I mean, I think first I wanted to address an elephant in the room for me anyway, which is when we talk about uncertainty and unpredictability, we're in the middle of a war right now with a president that said that money is going to be completely diverted away from healthcare and from for infrastructure and all of the domestic needs. So,
oh my God, see, we're the president of a war and all this money is.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So I'm concerned and also like major recession, worse than what we saw in 2007, 2008 so that's an elephant I think we haven't discussed at all here. So the other piece is how reactive we are in policymaking versus proactive. And especially when it comes to things like economic development and the communities that we want to see built. In healthcare, there's social determinants of health and talking about health outcomes. And social determinants of health is really how you plan your communities to improve health outcomes because 80% of health outcomes are really based off of where you live, work, and play. Right, versus the actual end of life healthcare. So are we looking at creating intergenerational spaces to address social isolation and whatnot? And I don't think that those things from the healthcare world and the think tanks there have actually moved over to the planning and housing planning and community planning. And on the jobs, I also have 3 children in my 20s who, went to the top universities and were the top students. And I'm talking Caltech and Stanford and watching the struggle for that generation to get jobs. You're talking the best of the best. So they got the best education, but if the jobs aren't there, and that's something we need to be thinking about, is that entry level, and it's such a short-sighted view the companies are having to not have entry-level jobs, because then how do you end up having the other positions? So where are we thinking about economic development to actually help our students and our graduating students who did everything right, and the opportunities aren't there for them. So that's where I would like to be seeing us moving towards, is going from reactive to saying, what do we want to see for Los Angeles? We're going to be losing, and we already are, right? My community has a lot of people in the entertainment industry. A lot of those jobs have gone away, right? So we're trying to figure out, like, what is it? We need to be thinking, what do we want Los Angeles or Southern California economy to be looking like? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi. Let me go to Mrs. Doby.
Thank you, kind sir. This is more of a comment, and I would just ask that we take a more strategic and surgical look at the suggestions that we're making and the input that we're giving out, because I find that we get a lot of cookie cutter options. And when you're a very small city, I think I'd be considered like a super micro city. And then you get some of these bigger things that look like they were kind of put together for like an LA or Santa Monica or even in Irvine or Anaheim. It becomes very difficult. My friend on the other end said conformity. I can't conform. So I think that as a major organization, if we look at ways to make it more, how do you eat an elephant? Yes, let's customize some things. I think that we are now at a place, especially if you're going out to 2050. I heard that number and was like, dear God, how old will I be? But really look at it, make it fit. Well, baby, so listen, you can't guess my age and I'm not going to tell you, but to stay on track and follow Vice Chair over there, that is my great suggestion, is that we really try to be more strategic with what the options are instead of these huge paintbrushes. Like if we could get more nuanced, I think you'd get more buy-in, and then it would also be more effective across the state.
Thank you. That was our last comment, but I just want to say to this group here, you asked some tremendous questions. I want to thank you for getting involved in this. Truly appreciate it. But I want to give a round of applause to our presenters, if you don't mind. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Again, thank you for your discussion. We are now moving on for the sake of time.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. Yeah, we did not call for public comment on this last topic. So if you could make a call for public comment on
Sure.
on the topic and the consent calendar at the same time, we hopefully can be more
That's
efficient.
just what I was going to do.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, you got it, sir. So thank you for the discussion. We'll move on. For the sake of time, I would like to request that we include the vote for the consent calendar with item 1. If there are no objections, do we have members of the public who wish to speak on item 1 or on the consent calendar?
We do have a raised hand by RC member Chelsea Byers, who is not at a noticed location, but I believe she wants to make a comment as a public speaker.
We can allow that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I did just want to share my reflections and apologies. It's not in a more formal capacity today, but I really appreciated the comments and remarks of the last speaker and hearing all this data and seeing and understanding the tremendous shifts that we're experiencing as a region. To me, this and what this body is really endowed with doing is setting up a long haul view and planning for the type of region we want to see. I remember hearing last month when this initial presentation was brought to us that we're losing congressional seats as a matter of losing population. And I think the stature and renown of California comes from its economic status, its population status. And to me, the housing shortage that we've experienced as a state has been central to this. So while we continue to plan as a region, both in terms of growth, transportation, housing is an essential component of that. And the myriad of housing options and types of housing available is what attracts people to this region. And we have a big attraction opportunity in the years and years ahead. So I just want to keep us focused on a long haul vision. What type of California and type of Southern California region are we building that invites and welcomes people from all around the world to be a part of this engine that we have been so proud to build? Thank you.
Do we have any other public comments, Maggie?
Not at this time.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve item number 1 and the consent calendar item number 2.
Wallace.
Make a motion.
Need a
Colleen,
second?
go ahead.
I make a
Second.
motion.
Mirish.
And Marish,
For the
just get there, Maggie.
So we had a first by Wallace and a second by Mirish.
Thank you, Maggie. Appreciate that.
Mr. President, with your permission, I'd like to just make an announcement that might help us get through the very extensive, longest roll call ever. The joint policy committees are big bodies. So the clerk is going to call the roll by committee in alphabetical order. So just like you're used to at your regular meetings. Because we've got so many people attending remotely, please be on the lookout to hear your name. And please do not unmute your microphone until you've been called. We're having some technical challenges with static, et cetera. So we appreciate your patience and your cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. I will start with the CHD first. Joe Baca. Joe Baca. I see that you're trying to speak. If you can just give me a thumbs up. Thank you so much. Debbie Baker.
Aye.
Wendy Bucknam.
Aye.
Don Caskey. Tanya Doby.
Aye.
Deborah Dorsporada.
Yes.
Keith Ike.
Yes.
Shauna Elias.
Yes.
Bob Engler.
Yes.
Wayman Furman. Margaret Finley.
Yes.
Claudia Frometa. John Gabbard.
Yes.
Victoria Garcia. Gary Gardner. Mike Goodsell.
Yes.
John Grass.
Yes.
Mark Henderson.
Yes.
Cecilia Hupp.
Yes.
William Hussey.
Yes.
Megan Kerr. Yes. Matt Levere.
Yes.
Annie Marshall. Betty Martinez Franco. John Mirish.
Yes.
Joseph Moravito.
Yes.
Cynthia Moran.
Yes.
Rocky Rhodes.
Yes.
Sheila Rossi.
Yes.
David Shapiro.
Yes.
Becky Shevlin. Mary
Yes.
Solor. Was that a yes for Becky Shevlin?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Mark Warnick,
Aye.
Jeff Wood,
Aye. Even them.
Judy Woolsey. Judy Woolsey.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony Wu. Tony Wu. Frank Yokoyama.
Yes.
Thank you. I will now call on the EEC membership. Ana Beltran.
Yes.
Art Bishop. Art Bishop.
Bishop, yes.
Daniel Brotman. Marta Cardenas Singh.
Yes.
Margaret Clark. Jenny Crosswhite.
Yes.
Carmen Hernandez.
Yes.
Sherry Horn.
Yes.
Britt Huff.
Yes.
Ryan Joes. Joe Kelmick.
Yes.
Stephen Leash. Elaine Litster.
Yes.
Patricia Locke Dawson.
Aye.
Yanay Lopez.
Yes.
Daniel Ramos.
Ramos, yes.
Patty Sinicol. Patty Sinicol. Jennifer Stark. Jennifer Stark. Ali Taj.
Yes.
Tamala Takahashi.
Yes.
Connor Trout. Dale Welty. Dale Welty.
Yes.
And now I will call on the team.
Yes.
Zeal Ahir.
Yes.
Javier Amezcua.
I had to vote thumbs up. When they called me, they couldn't hear me.
Brian Bergson. Austin Bishop. Is that Bergson a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Delgado. Jonathan Dumitru. John Dutray.
Yes. Do you hear me?
Ryan Fish.
I think they did. Otherwise, they would have asked you to give thumbs up.
Lauren Hughes Leslie. Mike Judge.
Yes.
Yes. Hughes Leslie, yes.
Trish Kelly.
Fred Jung, aye.
Trish Kelly is yes, and also William Go is with me, and I didn't hear his name.
Yes.
Trish Kelly, yes.
Linda Krupa.
Yes.
Leon. Ken Mann.
Ken Man, yes.
Juan Munoz Guevara.
Munoz Guevara, yes.
Ara Nigerian. Ed Reese, Gabriel Reyes,
Reyes, yes.
Reese,
Maggie, I think they're having audio problems. I just got a note.
Okay.
They're not hearing. So if you didn't hear and you didn't vote, we'll give you some time to vote afterwards. Reyes is.
Could you just,
You know what? I'm gonna speak over.
Reyes, yes.
can you hear us, Crystal Reese? We see you. It's
I can now, so yes.
Alisa Lay, Jack Schwank,
Yes.
thank you. Emma Sharif, Marty Siminoff,
Yes.
Jeremy Smith,
Spiegel, yes.
Cynthia Sternquist, Steve Ty,
Yes.
William Uphoff,
Yes.
Michael Vargas, Scott Voigts, Colleen Wallace,
Yes.
Alan Wapner, Alicia Weintraub,
Yes.
thank you. Thomas Huang,
Yes.
consent calendar passes with 71 votes yes, 0 votes no, and 0 abstentions.
Thank you. First of all, I
This
want to
is
say.
Sandoval from the Transportation
Appreciate it.
Committee.
If
My
we
Committee
name
can,
was
members,
not
I want to say
called.
thank you for your patience
Mr.
and your
Chair,
participation.
I do see Sandoval. Is that a yes?
Yes, yes, I didn't hear my name called, but Sandoval is a yes.
And so is Dennis Michael.
Same with Steve Manos.
Also Bayless from Anaheim, yes.
Also Navarro, yes.
And Harnick, yes.
This is John Detroit. Can you guys hear us? No.
Hughes, Leslie, and Mann hear you, yes.
Doris Parada for a yes.
William Go, yes.
Thank you. We've got your vote.
Trish Kelly, yes.
That brings us up to 74.
Thank you. Once again, thank you for your patience. Truly appreciate it. And this meeting now is adjourned. Thank you.